Hey, welcome back to 5-Minute Life Hacks. This is your host, Natalia Ambrosia, coming at you from my apartment in Sayulita, Mexico. Now, if you haven't listened to my episode on managing crisis, go do that. But I'm in Sayulita for a few weeks to take a breather, work from here, and figure out what comes next. In the meantime, let's get started on today's episode because it's a big one. It might actually change your life. Now, I know that sounds like an overstatement, but I really do believe that the tips I give you today might really change your life, especially if you have any health concerns or a loved one has any health concerns, or if you have any health concerns in the future, you're going to want to listen. As always, this episode was inspired by my own life, but for the purposes of this episode, I am going to summarize the events and the feelings because there is a lot. So, for the first 3 months of this year, I had to deal with a major crisis. My mom is bipolar, and this means she has highs and she has lows, but she treats it and usually manages quite well with medication. And now that is an understatement because people with bipolar need to cope with it and their family members need to cope with it. And it can be a lot, but it can be also quite manageable. Very rarely, my mom has had a psychosis, which is a loss of touch with reality, which is a symptom, something that anyone can have, but those who have mental illnesses can be more susceptible to psychosis, and psychosis can be quite difficult to manage. And for us, it was. So we have before taken her to a hospital when this has happened so they can treat her, look into her medication, and give her proper care. And this has been fine and sorted her out. It is still a very hard and difficult experience for everyone involved, especially the person who has to go to the hospital, but it works. Now, this time around, we tried everything we could, and then we ended up taking her to the hospital. However, she seemed to be getting worse and worse. Now, my mom is 65 and the most energetic person I know. She was tired, confused, and weak, and she did not seem to be getting better. The doctor kept tweaking her medication, and the nurses kept giving me updates. Not once, however, did I speak to a doctor, or did anyone in my family speak to the doctor. I also realized that the doctor hadn't spoken to her primary care physician, hadn't spoken to her normal outpatient psychiatrist, and hadn't done any real medical history on her. But I trusted the doctor because that is what we are taught to do. So sometime during her stay, I was listening to a talk by the actress Jennifer Esposito, who is now diagnosed with celiac disease. Celiac is an autoimmune disorder, often confused with a gluten allergy, which is a little bit less severe. Now, Jennifer talks about how her entire life she knew something was wrong with her, and they kept doing tests and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And oftentimes people thought she was just making stuff up, but she kept persevering. And the point of her talk was to encourage people to fight for their health, especially if they felt that there was something wrong. Now, after this talk, I was called by one of my mom's nurses, and she told me that the doctor thought my mom had early onset dementia. And although you might expect the first reaction to be scared and sad, my first gut reaction was no, this is not the case. Even if it were the case later, this is too abrupt, and this does not happen abruptly. In any case, she seemed to be getting worse. They said she was ready. We picked her up. She was the worst I've ever seen her in my life. She seemed like she really did have dementia at this point, but I still knew that there was something wrong. She spent the night at home, and it was awful. I had to take her to the emergency room the next day, and they gave her sedatives, and then finally they wanted her to go home. But I had this thought in my head that something wasn't right. So I sat there and I demanded to speak to doctors until I got a second opinion, and they were able to look at her chart and tell me that all the medication she was given was for dementia. They ended up doing a bunch of tests, realizing that she didn't have dementia, and they had her do a detox from the medications. And in the end, she was at this hospital, this very wonderful hospital. They treated her for bipolar. They did a full medical history. They talked to her family about who she is as a person and had they noticed any signs of decline. And ultimately, she ended up fine. She's at home now, 100%, and she's better. But that first doctor took liberties and did not even bother to figure out who she was as a person. And now I dread to think what would happen to somebody without family or without family who has any means. Like, my mom could have become really mentally disabled from this medication, but we fought, and now she's better. So the purpose of this episode is to empower you to listen to your body and to know that you know yourself best. You've lived with yourself longer than anyone else has. I'm not saying doctors do not know what they're talking about, because they do, but they will not know you more than you know you. So listen to your body. And if you don't know how to do that, learn. I have an episode on tuning into your body, but also just listen, ask yourself questions. Try and figure out what is wrong, whether you're thirsty, whether you're hungry, whether you need to pee. Start there. Number 2 is trust your gut. If you feel like there's something wrong and you're not satisfied with the answers or you're not satisfied with the treatment, then go somewhere else. Which leads me to my third tip is ask questions. Ask questions until you feel satisfied. Don't feel embarrassed. The doctors are there to work for you. And unfortunately, especially in the US, the medical system is built on treating symptoms and not preventing them. They don't get to the root cause. They treat the symptoms, You may have high blood pressure and they may prescribe high blood pressure medication, but something's off. And maybe that's because you've just dealt with a really difficult situation and your anxiety levels are high. And so your blood pressure is high. And really, maybe you need a therapist and to change your diet rather than just medication. So trust your gut, ask questions, get second opinions, do your research, and empower yourself to take hold of your own health. And know that you will oftentimes know yourself best and a family member best. I hope that this helps you and helps those you love. As always, please feel free to reach out to me at Natalia Ambrosia on Instagram. I love hearing from you. I'm sending you so much light and love. Have a wonderful day. Bye.